To new players who might have just recently joined World of Warcraft, creepy or scary places in-game are probably the last thing on their mind. But to players who have been playing for years, paying attention to detail, and somewhat relatively familiar with the lore, you know that this game, in addition to its fantasy adventure theme, also possesses a good handful of creepy and dark attributes. In today's video, we are going to cover 10 creepy places in the World of Warcraft. Number 10. STRATHOLME. STRATHOLME was the most populated city in Lordaeron prior to the rise of the undead. The fall of the city was brought about when Prince Arthas Menethil decided to massacre the entire city's inhabitants when he realized that they were all infected with the undead plague. The city was then taken under control of the Scourge, since the entire city was pretty much rendered incapable of being restored to its former glory. Buildings were set aflame and corpses littered the streets, which was no problem for the Scourge since it matches their theme perfectly. Now when you enter the fallen city, all you see is acolytes from the cult of the damned, undead abominations, restless spirits of the people that had been slain in their very home, and fires that still burn now, since the day Arthas marched into the city to purge it. Number 9. DARKSHIRE. There's definitely something off and cursed about DARKSHIRE and DUSKWOOD entirely in general. The zone itself is actually stated to be a cursed, dying land and a realm of horror. This is strange because the land is relatively close to Stormwind, but it is also closer to malevolent forces in the south. Throughout the zone, the people of Darkshire are under constant attack from undead ghouls, skeletal warriors, feral worgen, and even ogres who have inhabited the land after moving from Deadwind Pass, which is really bad since Stormwind has pretty much abandoned the zone from being under its protection, meaning that the villagers who are too stubborn to move from their homes are forced to fend for themselves. In addition to all this crap that they have to worry about, Abercrombie, an old hermit who once served as a kindly alchemist working to stop the undead, has now been driven insane because of the death of his wife. So what does he do? He constructs an abomination called Stitches that utterly terrorizes the town, killing pretty much everybody in Darkshire. In addition to this, because the zone isn't messed up enough, the relatives of all of the current councilmen in Darkshire's current town hall were slaughtered by Medivh in Karazhan. It is believed that this massacre corrupted the lands of what was once known as Grand Hamlet, eventually changing what was once Southern Elwyn into Duskwood. Number 8. Ravenhill. When you travel to Ravenhill, you may wonder why most, if not all of the people in the town are standing outside the rundown houses rather than trying to rebuild them. Well, it's haunted. The town once took pride in its honor of the dead, but ironically was actually wiped out by the undead as well. The former inhabitants tried retaking their homes by battling back their loved ones who had been risen into undeath, but were unable to stop the restless spirits. Even members of the Defias Brotherhood tried to occupy the town, but were constantly under attack by the undead to where they too were forced to move. Now when you enter into the houses of Ravenhill, you can see the restless spirits of the fallen haunting the settlement. If you have a warlock that can detect invisibility, a mage who is invisible, or if you buy a detect invisibility potion. Number 7. Vashj'ir. Vashj'ir being underwater is reason enough to be creeped out by the zone, because what does an ocean have? An abyss. What is an abyss usually associated with in World of Warcraft? An old god. More specifically, N'Zoth, who is strongly hinted to be underneath the water somewhere. And this is most likely to be true considering that when you travel to the abyssal depths where the atmosphere completely changes into a cloak of darkness, you find a good number of faceless ones battling back Neptulon's minions as well as Naga spread throughout the zone doing whatever they are doing. Two races that already bear the mark of an old god plus a speculation of an old god being underwater equals me getting the hell out of there. Also in the puzzle box of Yogg-Saron, it states, "At the bottom of the ocean, even light must die," as can be seen with the emergence of the faceless ones in the abyssal depths and how light quickly changes into dark. Number 6. Witch Hill, Dustwallow Marsh. When you travel to Witch Hill, there will be two NPCs inside of a house, one by the name of Swamp Eye Jarl and another by the name of Mordant Grimsby. Swamp Eye Jarl will give you strange quests with really weird descriptions such as, "Eye juice is good juice for drinking. Too bad most critters only have 2 eyes. But spiders have lots of eyes, lots and lots. And dark mist eye juice is tasty." On the other hand, Mordant Grimsby, his friend, has stated that he came all the way out here to visit Jarl. but ever since he has arrived, very strange paranormal events have been occurring, not to mention the fact that Jarl is acting batshit crazy. So while you gather spider eyes for Jarl, Morden asks you to question the ghosts around Witch Hill for more information. When interrogating them, they say responses such as, "It was terrible. The demon. Its hold is too strong. It's too late for Jarl." After further investigation, we go back to inform Grimsby about what we discovered, and together, we managed to flush out the creature responsible for all of this strange activity, which turns out to be a gargoyle that had inhabited the land long before the humans settled there, slowly corrupting and driving new inhabitants to the brink of insanity. Although the end boss being a gargoyle isn't too scary, the atmosphere of the cursed zone, in addition to the questline itself, makes it pretty creepy, especially when Jarl tells you to find him a blade, and find it soon, because what he plans to use the blade on won't remain in the cabin forever. Number 5. The Sludge Fields. The Sludge Fields is probably one of the creepiest Forsaken fortifications in WoW, mainly because it is led by a mad warden who's operating unchecked and who's obsessed with experimenting on the Forsaken, undead, and live humans. The Mad Doctor will carry out with his plans no matter the cost, which in turn has provided horrible results such as Forsaken being transformed into mindless undead and humans being submerged into the ground like plants, immobilized and helpless, while ghouls around the area are constantly running around in circles from time to time, even pouncing on the humans and devouring their heads while they can really do nothing. In the quest Do the Right Thing, you have an option of freeing these planted humans, and some of them will say, "Should you ever be buried neck deep in feces and urine, I'll be sure to lend you a hand." Number 4. NAXXRAMAS. NAXXRAMAS is one of the strongest undead bastions that the Scourge has at their disposal. When you enter the raid, you get the immediate sense that you are in a place that you honestly should not be in, and for good reason. The music that is heard is bone-chilling as you make your way through the stronghold, battling back undead soldiers, former friends, hidden poltergeists, grotesque abominations, and stitched cadavers. And while you are fighting, you will hear numerous screams from the women and children that are trapped within Thaddeus, which may lead to a good amount of people making their way to this giant undead construct first, so that they won't have to hear its blood-curdling cry throughout the raid. This raid is literally everything scary about the Scourge in one place. In one corner you find a mindless abomination that used to be numerous people in life, and then in another corner you see the all-powerful right hand of the Lich King himself, responsible for so much death, devastation, and destruction that it's pretty hard to believe that we actually managed to defeat him in NAXXRAMAS. Number 3. The Karazhan Crypts. The Karazhan Crypts is no doubt one of the creepiest places in WoW. If you manage to get into the crypts, you will find some pretty crazy stuff, such as tons of hooks and chains, mounds of bones that make NAXXRAMAS look like a kindergarten playground in comparison, and dozens of bodies chained and strung up in a body of water. The creepy thing is that we don't exactly know why this is here. Tons of rumors and speculation are brought up, such as it is where Medivh went to torture and kill criminals or quote-unquote sinners, and that the crypt is actually a mirrored version of Karazhan, reflecting the evil portion of Medivh that he was trying to suppress. Numerous of other posts on the forums also stated that the reason it was not implemented into the game was because Blizzard considered it to be too graphic and that it bordered the mature rating too much to where they had to scrap it. Unfortunately, however, I could not find a blue post to confirm this. Number 2. QIRAJ. QIRAJ is no doubt one of the most eerie and unsettling places in Kalimdor, from its lore to its music to the NPCs that inhabit the area. The story of the kingdom is that after the old gods fell in the era of the Black Empire, Cthulhu was imprisoned under Silithus. In order to maintain security and keep a constant vigil over the old one, QIRAJ expanded the prison into the mighty bastion that we all see now as QIRAJ. However, the powers of Cthulhu and his minions are not to be taken lightly. The Akiri race managed to overpower their titanic subduers, transforming their prison that once contained them into a kingdom which housed both the Kiraji legions as well as Cthulhu himself. Also, the music of QIRAJ is probably the creepiest of the game, since it is the one soundtrack in WoW that really embodies the terror of the old gods. In addition to that, it is not only the resting place of the first old god we encounter, but it is the main headquarters of the QIRAJ, an enormous insectoid race that tower like skyscrapers in comparison to us, all of them capable of tearing us apart with their bare hands. Reason I say this is because General Rajax in the ruins of QIRAJ actually does this to Fandral Staghelm's own son. Tears him in half, right in front of his own father. An old god plus creepy music in a desolate zone with sadistic insects ruling over the kingdom just waiting to tear you apart? Yeah, that place is pretty damn creepy. Number 1. Duskwood Cemetery. In the outskirts of Duskwood Cemetery, a poorly crafted and what appears to be rushed wooden grave can be located away from the other graves. The grave actually belongs to a man named Morgan Lattimore, a brave knight who fought in defense of the innocent, poor, and the afflicted. When Morgan was called to battle back the orcs and the undead and fight alongside many other paladins, including Uther the Lightbringer, he was forced to leave his wife and 3 children behind as he fought for his homeland. But as days passed, Morgan began to lose faith in the battle at hand. He witnessed terrible things: Uther's death, the fall of Lordaeron, and the disbanding of the Silver Hand. The only thing that kept him from insanity was the thought of going back to his family. But when he came back, instead of seeing his beloved wife and their children, he saw a small grave with the name of his wife written on it. For hours the noble knight wept on his knees until something in his head snapped. The last string which tied him to sanity had been cut. He withdrew his sword and began bombarding the gravestone with attacks until the cemetery's attendants came to calm him. But as they approached, Morgan turned his rage upon them and ruthlessly and savagely murdered all of them. Upon realizing what he had done, Morgan removed a small knife from his belt and plunged it into his own heart. The following day, this poorly crafted gravestone was constructed and the body of the once noble knight buried in the grave. But days later, Morgan's grave had been disturbed, his body nowhere to be found. In the quest Morladim, where players are assigned by the mayor's daughter of Darkshire to kill an undead knight, we find out that Morladim is actually Morgan. So consumed by the grief of not being able to save his family, Morgan could not die a peaceful death, but instead now haunts Duskwood Cemetery as a restless undead. Now this probably isn't the creepiest mention on the list, but it's definitely a great and tragic story with some creepy aspects to it, which made me put it at number 1. It definitely deserves a mention, and hey, if you don't think one undead is creepy, there is also a catacomb right next to the cemetery that houses tons of the most powerful undead in the entire zone. The catacombs also lead to a secret laboratory owned by Morbent Fell, a necromancer who rules over the undead of Duskwood, and here you can see tons of ghouls being dissected on coffins and numerous abominations being stitched together on tables. Probably a lot creepier than the story of Morgan, but I prefer the story of Morgan more. And hey, they are in the same area, so if you want to knock out 2 birds with 1 stone, this is the place to go.